Understanding and knowing about stress. Now, stress is something that is a day to day phenomena. However, the amount of stress varies, and with this amount of stress that varies, we can have different conditions that could occur. So, today, what we are going to understand is the simple cause effect application of stress and how there are stress reduction techniques that can help us get rid of any kind of stress that we face. So let's begin with a simple example. It's exam time. So what happens is a child himself is there. He is playing all the day. It's late in the night and still he's enjoying a cricket match, and he is talking to his friend. He's fooling himself basically, all happy, all enjoying the time before the exam. Now what happens is he has a sleep, wakes up in the morning after an alarm, and that too he is very, very tired that he has to wake up early. And now he remembers what? Nothing, but it's an exam time. And then he realizes he has not studied anything, and he is also getting late for the exam. So, what he does is he rushes for the examination hall. Now, in this process, when he rushes for the examination hall, when he is there in his classroom, in his school, he thinks that he has not studied anything so far. And finally, nothing for surprise, the exam paper comes up. And when the teacher starts to distribute the exam paper, the other students start to write the exam. But this student who had been playing all day and all night was totally unaware what to write, and this is a stress. But this is not a kind of common example, I would say, but there have been many such instances, even in my lifetime, even in your lifetime, which could have created a stressful situation. Now, the situation of stress can be managed in one form or the another. So what happens are, there are challenges, there are problems with every one of us. Now the idea is, how do we take a challenge and how do we face a stress? Let's say there is a happy family and a child there. Now what happens is, the child is a little unwell one day. So that is a level of stress that the parents can tolerate. They would bring up some medication, they would think about giving some medicines, and they would remain stressed for a while until and unless the child gets better. But in case the child gets worse and has to move to a hospital, let's say in an ICU, what would happen? The condition of the parents would further deteriorate in terms of stress level, and even the child himself. So what happens is, this is a situation where stress gets burdened up, and while he is in the hospital, he thinks about his exam, he thinks about his daily curriculum, and everything gets worse and worse for everyone. So what happens is, stress can be positive to a time till we can take it, to a point beyond which the stress starts to turn into a distress. So what we need to understand today is two terms: eustress and distress. Eustress is a stress which basically arouses you to fight or to take a challenge. Now this is a level of stress which is good for you. You are little unwell, you want to take a medicine and get back to work, so that is eustress. But if you are little unwell and you turn into more unwell, what would happen? This you stress turns into a distress, and this is where our body's wear and tear starts to occur, and the condition of the stress further deteriorates. The energy level declines, the productivity declines, and this is not just the case with human beings. The same goes with various electrical appliances. Let's say, so I take a simple example of a bulb. It gives us energy, it basically lights the room. But what happens if the electric current passing through the channel becomes too high? What would happen? The bulb would fuse, and this would damage all the appliances. If there has been a little fluctuation, that can be tolerated by the bulb, by the electrical appliances. So same happens with us. A little of stress we can tolerate, but if it goes beyond a limit, it becomes difficult. And this is a situation of distress, what we say as. Now the next important thing is, how do we actually describe stress? Stress is nothing but the pattern of response a organism, a person makes to a stimuli. So once you receive a stimuli, the kind of responses you would make to the stimuli would help you understand and see that whether it disturbs the equilibrium or it is exceeding a limit that you can actually cope. So that is where we need to understand this scenario. Now coming back to the next case. The next case is, this stress is also known as a silent killer. All kind of lifestyle diseases, be it hypertension, blood pressure, diabetes, cancer, have been associated with stress. The word stress originated itself from a Latin word which is known as strictus, and that says tighten. There is another word which is the verb of it, which is known as stringere, and that means to tighten. Now the word reflects the internal feelings of tightness that occurs in an individual, a constriction of muscles of the breathing patterns, which is reported in people under high stress. So any reaction to an external stressor is known as what? It is known as strain. Any reaction to an external stressor is nothing but strain. Now, lot of researches have been done by Hans Sale, and he has been considered as the father of modern stress research. And he says stress is nothing but non-specific response of a body to any demand. Now, non-specific response means some would say they tend to eat more, others would say they tend to eat less, some would say that they feel unwell, some would say that they feel a kind of increased heart rate, some would have insomnia, they won't be able to sleep. So all those are kind of different responses that are seen. So it is a non-specific demand. If I as a person, if I as a psychologist want to explain what would be a condition if you are under stress, it's not possible unless and until I have a past history of you. So that is where we understand. Now the process of stress is very, very simple. There has to be a cause. Without cause, there is no stress. So there has to be either an internal cause or an external cause. Now internal cause can be conflict, frustration, internal pressure. External cause could be a social pressure. So those are the causes. Now, what is the internal state? The internal state is reaction to the stress. Now, what kind of reaction it could be? It could be biological reaction where there are changes in heart rate, changes in blood pressure, muscle contraction, and so on. There could be psychological reactions. You feel unwell, you want to tend yourself to get aloof, you do not want to get involved in the remaining tasks going in your family. So that is an internal state. You try to alienate yourself, take yourself away from that situation, and that is a method where you are trying to defend yourself from the stress. In case the stress is at an acceptable level, you would start coping with the stress. So what we need to understand is coping with the stress is very, very important. The next is the result. The result can be, as we said, if the stress amount is less, it can lead to increased activity and an encouragement for you to get well. However, if the stress level is more, it could lead to wear and tear of the body and create a situation of distress. So based on the level of stress reaction, that is the challenge that you have to overcome that stress, is important to understand. Now all this is very important that before we move further, it's important to understand stress is not a result of an individual, of an environment, but it is a kind of ongoing process because of the interaction of various social, cultural environment, and the attempt to solve these issues has been constantly working. So when we talk about a person's characteristic, we say there could be physical characteristics, which are the physiological characteristics, the health, the body constitution, the vulnerabilities. There could be psychological issues, the mental health, the temperament, self-concept, and there could be cultural things associated to it. Now, based on the person's characteristic, there could be various stresses which could affect a person in different amount. So there are two different persons, the impact of the stress, the same stress on two different persons would be different. And then there are resources. Some people have physical resources, money, medical care, other have personal resources where they can actually deal with a difficult situation, and some have social support, networking and professional help with them. Now, what are the types of stress? Now, types of stress, simply said, I could divide it into three criteria: environmental, psychological and social. Some examples for the same. When I say environmental, it could be noise, air pollution. When I say psychological, it could be a kind of loneliness, it could be no friends or something like that. When it is social, it is basically social, there could be loneliness, no friends, sorry. When it is psychological, it could be conflict, internal pressure, a frustration that could happen. And these are the terms that we would understand in a while. But whenever we are trying to understand stress, Lazarus theory has been very, very important. Lazarus theory basically talks about a very fundamental concept of stress, which says that which is based on the cognitive theory, or the theory of how you understand the stress or how you perceive an event and interpret it. So your perception and interpretation is important. Now, as per Lazarus, there has been primary appraisal. Now, primary appraisal of an event can occur in three ways. It could be positive, it could be negative, or it could be a kind of neutral which does not have any impact. Now, let's understand this negative event of appraisal. This negative event of appraisal can work in three ways. What are the possible three ways? It could be a harm, it could be a threat, or it could be a challenge. Now, how do we understand it? Harm is nothing but it is an assessment of the damage that has been done by an event. So that is harm. Threat is nothing but a kind of possible future damage that could be done because of an event. So harm is something which is already done. Threat is something which could be done in future, as simple as that. And challenge is what? Challenge is nothing but when you are confident of certain expectations, or you have a feeling that you would be able to cope with the scenario, you take it as a challenge. But with all these, we do have, with the primary appraisal, we do have secondary appraisal that comes into light. And this secondary appraisal is the assessment of one's ability to meet a harm, or to react to a situation, to take an event of challenge. So based on the past factors that are there, we can understand that there has to be certain things that we need to take into account. So what are the dimensions under which we take the stress? The first is intensity. It could be low, it could be high. The duration could be less or more. The complexity could be simple or complex, and predictability could be predictable, that I know I have an exam coming, or there could be an unforeseen circumstances, someone getting not well in your family. So there could be predictable scenarios, unpredictable scenarios. So when we understand the stress, it is on four major parameters. First is the physiological response of the body, the behavioral response, the emotional level of stress that you can actually tolerate, and then is the cognitive response. Now, cognitive response is the most important response, where you try to understand or perceive the series of events and interpret how can you actually solve those. So what happens is, hypothalamus, which is a center in our brain, initiates action into two pathways. Now, the first pathway involves what? It involves the autonomic nervous system. So with this autonomic nervous system, you have adrenal glands that release a large amount of catecholamines. Catecholamines basically are what? They are epinephrine or non-epinephrine. That means they produce a fight or flight response. That means you are either ready to fight the situation or you would fly away, you would run away from the situation. The second pathway is generated by the pituitary gland, and this pituitary gland basically generates and secretes corticosteroids, which are also known as cortisols, and cortisols provide the energy. They provide the ability for dealing with the emotional stress. So this could be anger, depression, anxiety, denial of the fact, and all the cognitive beliefs are basically a situation that a person tries to cope up here. The responses, as we said, in could vary in person to person. There could be physiological changes, there could be inability to concentrate, repetitive bad thoughts, morbid thoughts that could be there. So all those are examples of this. So as we said, there are two pathways that we need to understand. Now this stress itself can be of various types. There could be physical or environmental stress, psychological stress, and social stress. Physical stress is when you suffer from an injury, there is lack of nutrition diet, there is malnourishment, you cannot get a good sleep at night. Environmental are different a little. So environment could be a fire, a earthquake, a tsunami, a stressful situation that you have witnessed. Psychological is something internal to yourself. So any kind of frustration, conflict, internal pressure, social pressure are psychological, not social pressure. So social pressure is definitely social. Now social also includes a stressful situation that has been created. That could be let's say a situation where you have not good relation with your family or friends. There is a illness, there is a sudden demise of someone. So all those are social pressures or social stress that could occur. In the environmental stress, we also have noise, pollution, traffic issues. So all those are various stress levels. Commuting, so those are various types of stress that are associated with individual. Now out of these, the others are simple to understand. What we would be focusing today on is psychological stress, and as we said, this psychological stress could be of four types: frustration, conflict, internal pressure, and external or social pressure. So let's understand these one by one with a simple example. So let's say we'll first talk about frustration. So what happens here is, the idea is the goals and the motives are blocked. So let's say there is a situation when you are being announced the results in the classroom. Now what happens is, some of your friends get good marks, but when it is time for you to get the marks, you get very low grades or low marks in the result. So what happens is, this causes a frustration. Why others were able to do, but I was not able to do the same. So this hinders us from achieving a set goal that we should have, and therefore this is a situation which is classified as frustration. Now understand that in frustration there is blocking of a goal. So let's say this is a goal and this is my path to achieve the goal. This path is being blocked. This path I am not able to traverse, and therefore I am achieving low grades or low marks in the examination time, and this is a feeling of frustration. The next example is conflict. Now what happens in an example of conflict? Conflict occurs when there are incompatible needs that are there. So let's say at one end I have a job offer, at other end I need to study further. So what to do, what not to do? There is a constant conflict in mind. There are two classes, let's say a sports class versus a class on psychology. What should I attend? So this is a conflict, a tug of war that actually occurs in your back of mind, and you are unable to decide what to do, whether doing a job is a good option at this age or whether going for an education is a good option at this age. So this is how we understand the concept of the next psychological stress, which is conflict. Moving further, our next understanding of a psychological stress is internal pressure. Now internal pressure is nothing when it's a scenario when you yourself want to achieve higher standards of living, you achieve your higher goal or higher ideas that you think about yourself, but you are unable to do so. But when you are unable to do so, there is nothing but disappointment. So at one end you project yourself, you think yourself to be very well pleased, very well established, but what happens in reality is you are not able to achieve what you planned for, and that is an internal pressure. You create a pressure on yourself with a higher expectation that you keep in mind. And this is a feeling when a person says, I must be able to do everything perfectly, I must be able to do this task, I must be able to secure this. And this is an internal pressure that you create for yourself. The last one that we would understand today is the social pressure. So what happens in the social pressure is you have excessive demands by your near and dear ones. So let's say a child is there, he is happy with what he is doing, but there are parents, grandparents sitting around and constantly asking him, how many grades did you got, what subject you are trying to take, what is your future plan, where is your report card. So it creates a external pressure because they are dreaming about the child becoming a doctor, a engineer, a well settled professional. And when the child gets to know about it, it creates a whole lot of social pressure. So this is a scenario of nothing but a social pressure. Now we talked about the four major psychological stress. I repeat in summary again. It is frustration, conflict, internal pressure and social pressure. But before we move further, let's understand the sources for stress. So stress occurs in three major sources. There can be life events. Now, life events can be, as we mentioned before, they could be either planned. There is an exam tomorrow, planning to shift to a new place, or these could be an unplanned, sudden accident that a person has met, or there has been breaking up of a relationship. So, those are unplanned life events. Then there are hassles. Hassles are what? As I said, there could be noisy environment, pollution, neighbors who are always fighting. There could be traffic issues, there could be shortage of water, shortage of electricity. So all these are hassles in day-to-day life, and definitely developing nations are at a higher stake of hassles. And then finally a traumatic situation. A traumatic situation could be earthquake, a tsunami, a volcanic condition, or there could be, let's say, a robbery, a big event that has occurred in your life. And for these traumatic situations, psychological guidance and psychological help is required. So, psychological guidance becomes very important and essential for dealing with the traumatic situation. Now, what is the effect of stress? The effect could be either emotional, it could be physiological, cognitive, or behavioral. What is the difference? Let's talk about these one by one. So, in emotional, there would be mood swings. There would be erratic, unregular behavior. Sometimes a person would be happy, sometimes he would be sad. There could be anxiety, depression, tension. So, all these are effects of stress. Physiological, as we said, higher blood pressure, hypertension, increased heart rate, contraction of muscles. So, all those are physiological changes. There could be changes in the breathing pattern. Then there are cognitive factors. Cognitive factors means there is poor concentration. You are not able to concentrate what you are doing. There is mental overload. Oh, I have to complete this, I have to also do this, and tomorrow is the exam, I have to cover all this. There is reduced brain capacity. So even if you are trying to put in a lot of energy, you are not able to retain what you want to do. So it is reduced short-term memory. And then we have behavioral stress. Behavioral stress means you would start to eat less. There could be increased intake of caffeine products, coffee. There could be higher consumption of addictives like alcohol, cigarette. So all those are behavioral issues or effects of stress. So stress can be moderate if it is tolerable, but in case if it is not tolerable, it can turn into a chronic stress. Now, chronic stress is a stress that impairs the normal functioning of the body, impairs the psychological state of the body. So, when, in simple terms, if I say the emotional state, the physiological state, and the psychological stress state of mind are not under control, this is a state of burnout. Now, what is burnout? Burnout is nothing but a state of complete exhaustion. A person believes that he or she is not able to accomplish his day-to-day task, and he is totally tired, totally fed up with his surroundings, with the things that are happening around. And that is an extreme state of stress which is known as burnout. Understanding the general adaptation syndrome and how we actually cope with the stress. So this concept of general adaptation syndrome was given by Hans Seyel, and he is considered as the father of modern stress research. So under his study, the issue was that there were various stressors that were given. Now these were in the form of high temperature, insulin injections, or staying them in laboratory for very long period of time. So those were kind of some stressors that were given to the subjects, to the subject animals on whom Sale was experimenting, and based on the response he drew a kind of general adaptation syndrome curve. Now, what was it? It says that there are three phases, three stages. The first is the alarm phase, the second is the resistance phase, and the third is the phase of exhaustion. The alarm phase is a phase when one enters into stress. So, the level of arousal immediately starts to decline. Now, this could be any stressor. As we have discussed, it could be a stressor which could be physical, environmental, psychological, or social. There could be a kind of some loss in the family. There could be loss of job. There could be inability to attain higher education. There could be an internal stress of conflict where there is a tug between a job or a education. So those are all a kind of phase where one enters into the stress situation. Now this is where the activation of the adrenal pituitary and cortex actually takes place. So adrenal pituitary and cortex basically takes place, and it triggers the hormone to produce the stress. Now, as soon as the stress is there, one gets used to it, and there is a phase of resistance. The stress can be prolonged. Now, when the stress can be prolonged, there are parasympathetic nervous system which calls for more care to be taken by the body's response system, and the idea is to immediately confront any kind of stress that comes in. So any kind of stress that comes in, the person would try to say no, keep it away, and that is a resistance phase. They want to resist it, they do not want to know anything more beyond it. And finally is a phase of exhaustion. Exhaustion is a phase where there is continued exposure to the stress, the same stress, additional stress that could be there, and a situation when a person is no longer able to bear the stress, a state of burnout, as we have understood, a state where there is a complete decline in the physiological, psychological, and emotional levels. So hence Sale talked about this model in how the changes in the level of individual's phenomena take place in response to a stressful situation. But his model had been criticized a lot because he limited the psychological factors affecting the stress. So what major factors he covered were the real life factors, and those were extreme factors, let's say loss of job, death of someone, or a medical emergency. So he tried to keep the psychological stress at a lower end, and therefore he his theory of general adaptation syndrome was criticized a lot, but adhering to the lifestyle, making needful lifestyle changes, changing your diet, exercising regularly, continued activity, low fat intake are some of the ways which actually reduces your stress. The next is psychoneuroimmunology. Now, psychoneuroimmunology focuses on the link between three things. What are the links? It is simply the mind, the brain, and the immune system. So, we focus on three important aspects, and that is the mind, brain, which is the physical entity, and the immune response system. So, in our body, we have the WBC. WBC is responsible for what? WBC is responsible for destroying any foreign body that enters into our system. Now, this WBC can include or has three types of cells. Those are the T cells, B cells, and natural killer cells. What is the difference between the three? T cells are the cells which destroy the invaders. They completely destroy the invaders. They increase the immunological activity and basically help in uh, creating a immunological response to something. B cells are the ones that produce antibodies to fight the infection, and finally you have natural killer cells that try to destroy all kinds of viruses, tumors that exist in the body or that can harm the body. So there are three criteria under which we have WBC, or three types of cells under WBC. Now what happens? Stress can create a situation of cytotoxicity. It means that because of higher stress, the person can have destruction of the cell, cancer growth, tumor growth. So negative behavior, negative thoughts, associated anxiety, depression, hostility, aggression could lead to stressful situation. When there is a prolonged stress, cytotoxicity could increase in the body. Along with that, there could be irrational fears, mood swings, fits of depression, anxiety, irritability. So all those are some of the major know-hows of understanding how cytotoxicity could be increased. So Endler and Parker gave a strategy to cope with the stress. Their strategy was threefold. The first is we have to be task oriented. Now task oriented means scheduling a time management, solving similar kind of problems that you face, and that is how you can actually take your stress, take it as a challenge and find a solution for it. So be task oriented, obtain more and more information about this stressful situation and try to get rid of it. A simple example would be, let's say a person suffers from a disease XYZ. Now this is an immediate stress that he gets to know, but soon he tries to get and collect information. These are the 5 hospitals that provide good facility, and once he is there, he meets a doctor and thinks that his problem would be resolved. This stress level automatically declines. So this is a task oriented strategy. The next is emotion oriented strategy. Emotion oriented strategy says you must maintain hope. You must keep your hope high and try to control your emotions, control your anger, frustration, and you should not worry about what happens next. So, think in a positive direction and try to say I am definitely going to get out of this situation. So that is an emotion oriented strategy. And the last is avoidance oriented strategy. Avoidance oriented strategy involves denying or minimizing the seriousness of a situation. So any situation that you encounter can be very serious, but you just want to avoid it. You want to hide it behind the curtains. You do not want that to be revealed. So that is a avoidance strategy. You simply want to keep that thing away from your mind and avoid it. Do not hear, do not see anything related to it. So that is avoidance oriented strategy. Now, whenever we are talking about coping, we are trying to reduce the stress. So relaxation techniques or stress reduction techniques, which includes relaxation, meditation, biofeedback, cognitive behavioral therapies, are excellent ways of dealing with the stress. Along with this, we need to understand how the stress is. So we need to be either problem focused or emotion focused. When I say problem focused, what does it mean? It simply means we focus on the problem, the root cause of it, and try to get rid of the root cause. Let's say there is a plant and there is an infestation, because of which there is declining, let's say, productivity of the plant. So what you do is you simply remove those leaves, you remove the cause, and the problem would be solved. The next is emotional support that could be seen. Now, emotional support means I have a plan, I can definitely fight this, I can take over this. So this is a kind of emotional support where you support yourself that yes, I can do it and I will be able to cross any kind of barriers that come in the life. And therefore, we need to understand, when we are trying to handle any stressful situation, whether it can be resolved through focusing on the problem, or it could be resolved through emotional focus. Let's take another example of COVID scenario. With COVID and lockdown, there was severe impact to many businesses around the globe. Now, one could focus on the problem, but let's say a common man focusing on the problem and saying that I'll remove the root cause of the COVID situation is not practically possible. So what you have to do is you have to find out emotion focused approach, where you say, okay, these are just 2-3 months, I'll have to find some alternate way of business, I'll manage with what we have in the next few months, and then think about the future. So that is an emotional focused way of fighting with the stress. So how you cope with the stress actually is very, very important, because if you are not able to cope with the stress, that could lead to a situation of exhaustion, which is emotional, which is psychological, which is physiological, and ultimately this is a state of burnout where you are no more able to take the level of stress that you have. So that is how we essentially need to understand how to cope with a stressful situation. Let's understand some stress reduction technique. The first technique of stress reduction is relaxation. So the idea is to reduce your blood pressure, reduce the stress level, and create a condition of calmness. So deep breathing exercises, simple relaxation, lying down are some of the good examples. It actually brings your heart level or the heart rate into a normal level and reduces any kind of hypertension situation. So the first important way of stress reduction is relaxation. The next important way that we say is meditation. So it is a yogic phenomena where you are trying to create or enter into a altered state of consciousness, create a link between yourself and the mind. So create yogic methods is very, very important, and that is what is a meditation process. You are trying to get a response by a altered state of consciousness. The next important way of reducing stress is biofeedback. Biofeedback is where you try to monitor your physiological feedback, your heart rate, your lung capacity, and this happens through various ways. What are the various ways? The first is you develop awareness about a particular physiological response. Let's say it is heart rate. You develop awareness that this should be your optimum heart rate in quiet condition. Now you try to see what is your heart rate in a stressful situation, and then when there is a stressful situation, you would try to control to keep your heart rate at a normal pace. And this is a biofeedback based on the physiological capability. So physiological aspect or physiological understanding and training of one's health from the parameters, the indicators that you get is biofeedback. The next important way of basically stress reduction is creating visualizations. So you create a subjective experience for you, where you just sit down and think about a scenario which is very good, very soothing, and you block all the negative thoughts that are there and create a energetic movement for yourself, and that is which is known as creative visualizations, or creating visualizations for yourself. The next is cognitive behavioral therapy. Now cognitive behavioral therapy is an interesting therapy which was developed by mission bomb, and he basically talked about a concept where one has an ability to replace the negative thoughts with a positive thought. So simply taking, you have to remove all the negative thoughts from the mind. Let's say you have an exam tomorrow. So remove all the negative thoughts. I have not prepared. I have not done this. This topic is left. This section I have not even touched. I have not prepared the questions for this. And rather go for a positive thought. Okay, I'll do well. I'll achieve well. And there are three important aspects under cognitive behavioral technique, which is also known as the CBT technique. The first is where you do the assessment. You try to assess yourself how far there is the problem, discuss the nature of the problem. Then you understand the stress reduction technique. What could be the way through which your stress could be actually reduced? And the third is you take a follow up. That means you try to adopt that method in order to reduce your stress. And that is where we have the CBT, or the cognitive behavioral technique. The idea is to remove all negative thoughts from mind and bring in positive thoughts. And the next important way is exercise. Now exercise basically increases the physiological arousal. It increases the efficiency of heart, muscles, your proper blood circulation, lowers your BP, improves the body's immune system and response system. Some of the good exercises could be walking, cycling, playing, jumping, skipping. So those are some of the common exercises. Now coming on to another important concept, which is promoting positive health and well-being. So what is very important? First of all, we need to have a stress resistant personality. We should be so strong that we should be able to shield ourselves from all kind of stress. So we say there is a 3C approach to it. What is the 3C approach to it? First is you must be committed that you need to reduce your stress. The second is you should control yourself, and the finally is take a challenge and meet the issue very carefully. The next is life skills. Try to adopt your life style into a negative style, into a positive style from a negative style, and that is again where you have assertiveness, giving yourself a positive boost, a positive thought that you should be able to do it and you will be able to do it. You should be able to manage your time properly. If there is lack of time management, or the time management is not proper, it would definitely lead to stressful situations. Then you have a rational thinking. Rational thinking means you challenge your distorted thinking. So whatever incorrect thoughts are there, whatever distortions in thought are there, you try to challenge those thoughts. And once you are challenging those thoughts, you are creating a rational thinking for yourselves. Create better relationships, be it your office space, be it your family. If the relations are not good, what would happen? There would be frequent clash of thoughts, there would be frequent quarrels, and that would further lead to a negative health impact. The next is take care of yourself nicely and overcome unhelpful habits that could be there. Now any unhelpful habits that could be unhealthy for you should be definitely removed. Now what are the factors that also help in managing all this? So definitely diet. A good diet, good exercise, as we already said, is a perfect stress relaxation technique. Having a positive attitude and a positive thinking along with good social support. Now with the social support, we can say social support can be tangible. It could be in the material aid, for example, help with goods, services, monetary help, or there could be informational support where family or friends could provide you information about something, Or there could be an emotional support where you can always think that you can go back to your parents, discuss a issue, and get a solution for it. So social support can be in various types. As we said, it could be a tangible support, it could be an informational support where you try to get more information, which college is good, where should I take the admission, and so on. And then there could be an emotional support. Okay, you would be moving to a hostel, don't worry, you would have good friend circle, you won't feel homesick, and so on and so forth. So all these are social support. So in this section, what we have understood today are the concept of what is stress, the basic causes of stress, the psychological causes, which are the four causes, I repeat again: frustration, conflict, internal pressure, and social pressure. And then we talked about the effects of the stress, general adaptation syndrome, the psychoneuroimmunology, and finally the stress reduction techniques and maintaining a positive health. We would be covering many interesting lectures in psychology. Stay tuned. Have a wonderful day ahead.